Hello viewers and welcome to Africa and Beyond Television Network. We continue to take a look on what is happening in the nation of Zimbabwe. And we are taking a look on Zimbabwe corruption, scrutinizing Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. And in this episode, we need to compare between Zimbabwe Electoral Commission and the IEC of South Africa so as to see how money was looted in the nation Zimbabwe by Team Zim. So remember that South Africa does have 27 million registered voters. Out of 27 million, 16 million voted. And this is quite a big number. Zimbabwe does have 6 million registered voters. And out of 6 million, around 4 million voted in the last election. So we need to take a look onto these statistics. 6 million registered voters in Zimbabwe, 27 million registered voters in South Africa. Joana Mamombe, the MP for Harare West, is explaining something very important right here. Let us take a look on what she said. She says South Africa has 27 million registered voters. 27 million registered voters in South Africa. And the IEC had a budget approximately of 10 million, approximately, which means it's either below or above with slight figures. And ZEC with the 6 million voters, here is ZEC, 6 million voters, and had a budget of 188 million. This is the budget of Zimbabwe Electoral Commission then. And if you go to the election materials procurement scandals, you can actually explain that this is the reason why ZEC had this obscene budget. But let us get into the facts of this matter. We need to go into a fact-finding mission so as to understand these allegations raised by Joana Mamombe here to see if they can be substantiated. So doing so, we are going to ZEC report so that we get a report from ZEC to see how much did they use in the last election. Then we also go to South Africa and see how much did they use in their election. Then we get to the conclusion. So let me bring right here onto the screen the issues about ZEC. I'm going to bring you ZEC right here to see how much they received in the last election. How much they received in the last election. This is Zimbabwe Electoral Commission for you. This is the 2023 elections. And it's very important for us to get this correctly. They say that, okay, let me read. Let me see where to start to read right here. Okay. So a total of 896 billion was given to Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. 896 billion was given to Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. Let me try to make it bigger. Yes, this is it. 896 billion was given to Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. So if you are to do the mathematics, 896 billion, we have how many zeros? We have 9 zeros there. 896 billion divided by 5,903, which was the exchange rate as at December 2023, 12 December 2023. How much are we getting right here? We are saying 896 billion divided by 5,903 as the exchange rate. We get here 151 million. 151 million. That is the money which Zimbabwe Electoral Commission used in the last election. 151 million. Remember, in their report, they said they got 74%. So this is 74% of the total budget which was allocated, which had been allocated. So by December 2023, they had used 74% of their budget for the 2023 elections, and that is 151 million. Then let us go to South African elections and see what really happened to South African elections. So this is, let me just scroll to show you that this is the annual report of Zimbabwe Electoral Commission. This is the annual report, as you can see right here. These are the leaders. Where's ZEC? Where's my commissioners are? I know that we have a lot of Arakashi who would try to come and say this is not authentic. So this is the annual report for Zimbabwe Electoral Commission right here for the year 2023. This is it, and it carries the how much they used for the elections in 2023. This is the source right there. Let us go to the one of South Africa. We are now going to the one of South Africa so that we get to understand how much did South Africa use in their elections, because it's very important for us to be doing so. Let us go to South Africa. So we are going to be guided by the Republic of South Africa Government News Agency right here. IEC adequately funded for elections. This is the National Treasury of South Africa. So we are getting from their source directly. Then let us go to the report and understand how much South Africa got in their elections. 27 million registered voters. Here is the point. Let us go right here. How much was allocated? This is where our information is. This is what was allocated. We have right here 2.2 billion allocated for the elections. We have 2.2 billion allocated for the same period, the same one which was allocated for ZEC, 2.2 billion. So this is 2.2 billion. We have how many zeros there? Right. We have 2.2 billion for the South African elections divided by 18.6 rand, the exchange rate. So this is 118 million for the South African election. Do the math. The information is on the screen. I have highlighted there the figures. And if you calculate with the rate, you see this is 118 million rand, United States dollars, 118 million United States dollars in South Africa. And this is very important to note that South Africa used 118 million in their elections. Zimbabwe used 151 million plus. And they didn't even end there, because they said they had to carry over the cost of the 2023 elections to this year's budget, because they didn't finish to pay off everybody who was supposed to be paid. So if you take a look, South Africa with 27 million people, 118 million, Zimbabwe with 6 million people, 151 million, and a shortfall, then you can actually see that mari yakadyiwa. This is the reason why Zimbabwe mari dziri kubiwa. And when we complain about these issues, it's because of this corruption. So we are here to show you the facts. We are comparing South Africa and Zimbabwe. Elections in the same financial year, 12 months funding of the elections. South Africa is at 118 million. Zimbabwe is 151 million spent pakatosara zvikwereti. This is the reason why we are saying vana vachivhayo dai mambogara pasi. A lot of people will see us as if we hate this government. No, we do not hate our government. We love them. This is the reason why we are speaking to say you have to stop corruption, because corruption is bleeding our nation. That is a fact. So I agree with Honorable Mamombe right there. I agree with Honorable Mamombe. This is something very important which she raised. She raised something very important there. She raised a very important argument there. A very powerful argument raised, and a very important argument. And I agree with her 100% to say, if you take a look on these statistics, you can actually see kuti mari yakadyiwa, mari yakarohwa. This explains the reason why 40 million was given to Chivayo. Okay, let us take a look on quality. Quality chete. South African elections, they had digital presentations of everything. You could see digital updates of everything happening. With 27 million, South Africa is so big in terms of distance which are supposed to be traveled across South Africa. Zimbabwe, I don't know kuti inopinda kangani mu South Africa. So let us try to find that South Africa area in square meters. Right. South Africa area in square kilometers. South Africa in square meters, it's 1,221,000 square kilometers. Square kilometers. South Africa is 1,221 square kilometers. Then Zimbabwe area. Zimbabwe area in square kilometers. Zimbabwe is 390. 390, which means if we are to put Zimbabwe inopindaka 4 mu South Africa, 4 times into South Africa, because South Africa is 1.2 million, Zimbabwe is 390. If we round off, we can go to 400 and then 1.2, which means 4812. You can actually see that Zimbabwe gets 3 times in South Africa. 3 times Zimbabwe getting into South Africa. And we are talking about this in terms of distance traveled by IEC officials and distance traveled by ZEC officials. Which means if you were to use area on its own, Zimbabwe was supposed to just cut the budget of South Africa divided by 3. So you would understand, Kuti, this is the reason why we say there is massive corruption happening. Mass corruption is happening in Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe would have used the 60 million yange yakatowandisa for the financial year kuti irane my elections successfully. 60 million yange yakatowandisa, but they used 151 million. 60 million minus 151. You can actually see that over 90 million was looted dry. Looted dry. Okay, we have talked about the issue of distance covered. On the issue of quality of service, South Africa offered quality service elections. Quality service elections in South Africa. In Zimbabwe, there was no quality. There was no quality whatsoever. Because take a look on the ballots in Zimbabwe. They were on a bond paper. On a bond paper. Takavotera pabepa se bond paper. In terms of printing, this was black and white. In South Africa, it was on a nice paper. Point number 1. Point number 2, it was on a color. It was colored. South Africa had 3 ballots. Zimbabwe had 3 ballots. There is uniformity there, which means there is no further justification in terms of the higher cost in Zimbabwe other than corruption. There is no any other justification. I know that they would try to say South Africa, Zimbabwe had more polling stations than South Africa. Okay, let us take a look on the comparative of polling stations. South Africa had 23,000 plus polling stations. Zimbabwe had 11,000 plus polling stations. And out of 23,000, South Africa is thrice bigger than Zimbabwe. And Zimbabwe is thrice smaller than South Africa. Which means the 11,000 polling stations in Zimbabwe are in closer vicinities. Which means the cost to move staff and everything else, it cannot go above South Africa. It's even half budget of South Africa, it can't. That is evidence of looting. That is evidence, clear evidence. If we are to investigate, this is the first point to investigate Emmerson Mnangagwa, Wikinochivayo, and Priscilla Chigumba. This is the first point. So Zimbabwe, when we speak about these issues, we are speaking with these issues because we love Zimbabwe. It's because corruption is hitting us. Corruption has taken our dignity away. Corruption has looted Zimbabwe home dry. This is the reason why we are suffering. And the politicians will continue to act as if it's something else. No. So in conclusion, Team Zimbabwe, Joana Mamombe right here is pointing out something very important. 27 million registered voters in South Africa. 6 million registered voters in Zimbabwe. But Zimbabwe used a higher budget than that of South Africa. Why? is because of corruption, is because of looting. One of the key points is that service delivery in terms of quality, Zimbabwe used lower quality, South Africa used high quality. Number two, South Africa is thrice bigger than Zimbabwe. South Africa had twice more polling stations than Zimbabwe, which means there is no justification whatsoever for Zimbabwe to use more money for elections for their own people. 6 million versus 27 million. Do the math. You can actually see with Maria Kabiwa. So the basis of investigating criminal activity happening in ZANU-PF, it starts there. If you want to investigate, this is where you start to investigate. The major question is, where is the Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission? ZEC, where is ZEC in all this? ZEC was given a bloated budget which they used without any single conviction, without any single recovery. Which means in Zimbabwe, the best thing to do is to simply disband ZEC and say, we do not need ZEC in Zimbabwe. Because ZEC is not serving the people of Zimbabwe. They have never convicted anybody. They are there making money. It's a way of employing cadres. Mnangagwa's cadres are employed at Zimbabwe Anti-Corruption Commission, making money out of it and making no convictions. Simple making noise every day. So if you take money which is at ZEC, you put it into schools, you put it into hospitals, it's better. So for those who tell you that sanctions this, sanctions that, those are lies. No sanctions are destroying Zimbabwe. Corruption is destroying Zimbabwe. And I have just given you an example. Zimbabwe had a budget bigger than South Africa for the elections. Yet Zimbabwe is 3 times smaller than South Africa. And if you are to count the numbers of registered voters, 6, 12, 18, 24, we have more than 4 times in South Africa. South Africa is 4 times bigger than Zimbabwe in terms of registered voters. So we have to hold these people accountable. We have to hold these people accountable. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And this is it. Namo, thank you very much. Francisco, thank you very much. Sinini Ngumbe, thank you very much, everybody, for coming. And this is it. We'll continue to watch and see, and we'll continue to expose corruption as it is, because our future is at stake. Change must come to the nation of Zimbabwe. Change is coming. And we need to make sure that there is change in the nation of Zimbabwe. Francisco says corruption is everywhere nowadays. Come to Malawi, you will cry. People are suffering with poverty 50 times than before. This is very important because, you know, these people, they've actually, they are looting Africa dry. No service delivery, but looting Africa dry. If you take a look on the response on the Malawian air crash, from 10 a.m. to the next day, it shows that these leaders are not serious. If they had put into motion activities to emergency services, they would have rescued the vice president of Malawi in time. So you could actually see that corruption is eating away the moral fabric of our people, eating away any sense of survival for the people. So thank you very much, everybody, for coming. We'll continue to expose corruption.